And we're about to get to one of the most important pages in the book, which is page 555. Caroline, Anna, are you ladies okay at the moment?
Yes.
Orky. And Daniel. Okay. Let me give you all that again. We're doing repetition. Yeah, that's an important page. Keep your hand in that page because we'll need it in a minute. I just want to take you through the initiating process group because I want to deal a bit more with what Daniel's asking us in terms of the duplication between the sections. So hopefully it's no surprise to you, even if you cannot remember it, which I do not expect. I don't expect you now to be surprised that if I said 4.1.1.1 business documents, 4.1.1.2 agreements, 4.1.1.3 enterprise environmental factors or politics, and 4.1.1.4 organisational process assets. These would be the inputs to, and particularly which process. You can look on page 25 to answer this question. So that's the process group. I'd like to know the process within the process group that this lot are going to be inputs to. We've already seen it once. Yes. Yes. So these are the inputs to develop project charter, and these two here, enterprise environmental factors and organisational process assets, are described to us, if you can read it here. So can you read the number there? I can, but I don't suppose you can. Okay, that says 2.3 and that says 2.2. So let's go and find 2.2 in the book, and as soon as you find the page number, shout it out so that everybody else can be targeting the page number rather than the section number. Okay, so are you there yet? It's page 38. Yeah, 2.2 we're looking for, which is confusing, isn't it, since the book has a part 2. And this is section 2.2. So here we have enterprise environmental factors. And I want to point out something else that I've done to you, I've done which I can't show you on that page because I've been a bit lazy and not marked it on that page. I've just turned randomly to a different page and we haven't got there yet, but I just want to show you my book. Because I hope you can you see that it says that I've marked something in the margin there? Yeah. And what I've written there is the letters IS. Because in this line here, this one happens to be program management. It says, and you don't need to find this page, it says program management is da 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 da. So that's a definition. So I've circled the word is in the text. I've written is in the margin so I can find it again. So each time as you're going through the book and you find a statement like enterprise environmental factors refer to, that's a funny way of spelling is. So enterprise environmental factors is conditions not under the control of the project team that influence, constrain or direct the project. Yeah, that first line is definition. So when a question says to you, your share price has dropped, and one of the answers is enterprise environmental factors. Does the change in a company's share price affect the amount of resources available to a project? Quite often it does, doesn't it? Yeah, and a factor out, and is the share price within the project manager's control? So if it said a change in questions have long, wordy text. We haven't seen any yet. You are working for a nuclear engineering company in a highly competitive market where your ability to borrow determines the quality of the resources that you can get. And your borrowing is leveraged on your share price, which has just dropped. In discussing this with your project, with your sponsor says these organisational process assets are a problem. These enterprise environmental factors are a problem. The sign-off of the charter is a problem. Some other option. Which one? Well, this is an enterprise environmental factor because it says enterprise environmental factors, and I'm changing the words, is conditions not under the control of the project team that influence, constrain or direct the project. And what we can now see here is that there are, actually there used to be 13, are there still 13? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. There are 14. You're going to write the number down there. There are 14 enterprise environmental factors listed here, and they are divided into those internal to the organisation but external to the project. So culture, facilities, infrastructure, IT, skill sets, and those external to the organisation, marketplace, culture again, legal, commercial, academic, industry, money, and physical or built weather and the like. So those 14 factors are going to be listed as inputs in a huge number of places, and each time it's some subset that's relevant to this process. They'll be different every time, but they'll come from these 14. The other thing that we're seeing as an input here is all the templates. So now we should look at section 2.3. Who can find 2.3? Yes, it was a trick question, it's on the same page. So we see here the organisational process assets, and here is spelt A-R-E. Because there's more than one of them. Organisational process assets is plans, process, policies, procedures, knowledge bases specific to the organisation. That's an interesting thing. Knowledge bases specific to the organisation. We're going to need to go over the page to see that. Before we do, we can see that they are grouped in two categories. So knowledge bases we'll see when we turn the page over. The other one we'll see when we turn the page over are processes, policies and procedures. And when we look at processes, policies and procedures on page 40, we see that they are grouped by domains or process groups. So we have stuff that's relevant to getting going, stuff that's relevant to being in motion, making progress. So initiating and planning is about getting going, executing, monitoring and controlling is about being in the journey, and then we have just a tiny bit on closing, where it says we need to do things like audits and evaluations. And then we have organisation knowledge repositories. And our knowledge repositories are our configuration systems. If you think of that, if you don't know what configuration management is at the moment, if you think of that as the warehouse of documents produced by the project and the warehouse of products produced by the project team, imagine I'm building a hotel. So I've got a project team busily building beds, but I haven't built any bedrooms yet. So each time they build a bed, we've got to stick it somewhere, and then later on it will be, can you get all the beds out of the warehouse and stick them in the hotel rooms? So we've got our configuration management knowledge repositories containing the versions of components, hardware or software, and that includes our project documents as well as our specialist stuff. We've got our financial records, so you might think of that as things like the general ledger. We've got historical information and lessons learned. Here's a rule of thumb. Do you know what a rule of thumb is? Vague heuristic. If you have an exam question and it says either use historical knowledge or it says add to historical knowledge, that's the right answer without reading anything else. Okay?
What's the right answer?
If it says either you're going to use historical information and knowledge bases or you're going to contribute to them, then that's the right answer, independently of the rest of the question and the rest of the answers. I'm obviously exaggerating here, but I'm trying to make you aware of the fact use of expertise is a primary piece of advice from the PMI to the project manager. So it's going to be the right answer in a lot of questions. The only time I wouldn't select use historical data is if one of the other answers was work breakdown structure, in which case work breakdown structure is going to be the right answer, independently of what the question is. I mean, I'm exaggerating here. I'm hoping that you're understanding the point. This is an area where the PMI attach a considerable amount of focus, and so should you as project managers. So historical information and lessons learned knowledge repositories, key. And then we've got issue and defect management systems, data repositories for metrics and project files from previous projects. Data repositories for metrics is another way of saying the input to estimating. So that's also very important. So our first process is using our politics and our procedures, and every process that comes from now on will use them as well. Not quite. I was like 40. I'm making the number up because I don't know it. 44 out of 49 are going to mention them. Interestingly, they get updated in only a very few places. We've already seen one. Communications updates organisational process assets. You don't need to memorise. You don't need to worry about that at the moment.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
I don't know the word repositories, but I understand.
A repository, a library, a place to deposit things.
Okay.
So if you substituted depository as opposed to repository, that's where we put stuff. These inputs arrive at Develop Project Charter, where we use expert judgment, data gathering, interpersonal skills, and meetings. We need really to look at those, but they don't have a section like we've just looked at for EEFs and OPAs, but they should have, because they are umbrella terms with lots of detail below them. And I need to expand them out to you in just a second. Develop Project Charter, we know, creates Project Charter. And in the first diagram I showed you, I showed it going off to Develop Project Management Plan. But actually, look, it goes to all these places. So Develop Project Charter is going to a lot of places, and there's no easy way in the PMBoK for you to be able to track where it's going to. You don't need to either. So you do not need to memorise all the inputs and the outputs. The more of them you can remember, the better. You do want to know where the project charter comes from. And there's a few places where you want to know where things come from and go to. And mostly that's within one of the cells on page 25. So where I drew it on the picture that we've already seen, I put some little footsteps next to it that went like 5.2, 5.3, 5.4. What are 5.2, 3 and 4 on page 25? Or on the... You can look on the coloured sheet. It's still reliable on the coloured sheet, even though the coloured sheet is out of date. So what are 5.2, 5.3 and 5.4? Just call out the names. Come on, we need to be quicker than this if we're going to get to the end of this week.
Requirements, define scope, create PDS.
Okay, so requirement, scope, breakdown structure. There's something that comes out of requirements, it goes into scope. There's something that comes out of scope, it goes into breakdown structure. So there's a little tiny sequence of steps there, and that's going to be the same in every one of the cells on that page. And you may choose to try and memorise what goes between things in those cells. That would be a good extra level of detail to add. It's not. That would be a good level of extra level of detail to add. It's worthwhile. You don't need to be able to do this though. I mean, I couldn't do that. If you covered that over, I couldn't tell you all the places the charter goes to. I could just say to you it's about 10 or 12 of them, and that they're mostly point ones. Can you see here? I don't know if you can see it from there, but they're mostly point ones because they're kicking off planning. So I could tell you at that level. If it's the charter, it's going into a planning process. Is that exclusively? Well, no, it's also going into the defined scope and closed project. Some people sat here, I can ask tomorrow where's the charter goes. And some people go, well, I remember it goes into closing and I remember everything else was at point one. Well, if you can do that, that's great. The other thing that's coming out of here is an assumptions log. Wow, look at all the places that goes to. And what's a real pain in the arse in this book is that it only lists assumptions log once as a heading, after which it's a subheading of project documents. So while it goes into all of these places, it never appears as a major heading in the inputs. We're going to have to look in the detailed tables to find it. And that's the case with many of the things that are both in here, tools and techniques, and the inputs and outputs. So we have a level of detail that doesn't easily come off the page in the book. And some of it is to your advantage to know, but it's going to be hard to track all the way through. So I'm showing you here to make you aware. I'm not saying so you now need to go and find all these and memorise them. As it happens, I'm not sure whether I included all of these in the revision aid. If you want the absolutely exhaustive set of everything, I can give you a slightly different URL. But I didn't want to give you 700 pages of notes. The revision aids are still 400 pages, I think. So I did think about cutting the revision aid down to the top 50 pages. You can tell me, actually, that would be a useful bit of feedback. If you find the revision aid too big, tell me, because if we were doing this 3 weeks ago, the revision aid then was 100 pages, and it grew to 400 to cover what's in here. So, and I sat there after I'd created it and said, this is too big. But I couldn't decide myself what to cut out of it. So, now this lot we know in initiating. What's the other process in initiating? Page 25 again.
Identify stakeholders.
Yeah, so this charter here is going to go to identify stakeholders, where, look, we're seeing expert judgment again. However, when we go and look at expert judgment over there, we see that this expert judgment here, and I've taken the words literally out of the book to show you what's going on here, but we've got, look, here's a pigeon and here's an eagle. So this is 4.1.2.1. You should be able to find that in the book, actually. 4121. You should be able to use the structure of the book and the fact you know the numbering system now to find 4121. See, I'm already there. Page 79. And it says, expert judgment is defined as, it's not worth circling this is, expert judgment is defined as judgment provided based upon expertise in the application area, knowledge area, discipline, or industry, as appropriate for the activity being performed. Such expertise may be provided by any group of persons with specialised educational training. And then it says to us that the expert judgment being applied here is organisational strategy, benefits management, knowledge of this industry, estimating of budgets and durations, and identification of risk in this context. Now, if I were to say, so expert judgment over here is this stuff, it would be almost. This is a pigeon. I think this might be a sparrow or something, because look, it says expert judgment should be considered from individuals or groups with specialised knowledge or training in the following topics. So that there is almost what it says here. Different words, but almost the same, because it says that these are people with knowledge or training, and these are people with knowledge, specialised education, that sounds like training to me, or experience or skills, but then this list is different. Understanding of politics and power, that's not in there. Organisation structure, is that one in there? Well, knowledge of individual team members' contributions, knowledge of industry type, knowledge of organisation. So these two are either the same or different depending on your perspective, and this expert judgment is going to come up all over the place. And this expert judgment almost always mirrors what these EEFs and OPAs for the process say. So when you see a process, EEF, OPA and expert judgment are all going to say roughly the same thing, but they're for this process. And then when you get to the next process, its EEFs, OPAs and EJs are all going to be clustered around the same area, but they'll be different from the other places. So when you know what the EEFs, the OPAs are, you can make a good guess of what the expert judgment is, or vice versa, you know what the expert judgment is, because they'll all be talking about roughly the same stuff. Because it's specific to stakeholders, or it's specific to chartering, or it's specific to procurement, or it's specific to risk identification. And the output then is the stakeholder register, change requests, project management plan updates, which, hey, we haven't created a project management plan if these are the first two processes we've done on Monday morning of our project. We haven't actually got a project management plan to update yet, but maybe this is phase 2 of the project. So now we have got a project management plan to update. And look, here's the assumption log, which we wouldn't have otherwise seen, because actually all we're told is we're going to update project documents. But buried in here is the assumptions log. So it's not mentioned. So all these actual places, so this is one, look, this is 13.3.4, so 13.3.4, I hope it's down here, there we go, 13.1.3.4. So that entry there is actually a sub-entry. They're not going to be easy to find. There's thousands of them across the whole of the book. So we're not... This heading here, project management plan updates and project document updates, isn't very helpful to us. Trying to memorise at the next level down is realistically not practical. So we'll memorise what we can. We're going to do the ones that are on the first page I showed you this morning. So that's the baselines, the registers, the change requests, the deliverables, the management plan and the charter, and everything over that is a bonus. Now I could have had exactly the same conversation with you about things like data representation and meetings. Meetings, just because it's here, doesn't mean it says exactly the same thing as here. But they're not as dramatic. You still okay?